You ever feel invisible in your own family? Like no matter what you do, they see you, but they don't. That's how I felt the day I realized I wasn't invited to the board meeting. Not by accident, not by mistake, but because my own family decided I didn't belong. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could keep me out of decisions that shaped my life, my career, my legacy. But they didn't know one thing. I knew the truth. And I was ready to show them exactly who really owned the company. You ever feel like no matter what you do, your family just doesn't see you? Like you're part of something so big, so important, but somehow you're invisible? That's exactly how I felt the morning I realized I wasn't invited to the board meeting. I grew up in a family where business wasn't just a career, it was our legacy. Our company had started from scratch, built by my parents with sweat, sleepless nights, and sacrifices that most people couldn't even imagine. As a kid, I remember sitting in my father's office, fascinated by the rows of numbers, the ringing phones, the constant back and forth of deals and negotiations. I wasn't just curious. I wanted to understand it all, to be part of it. Of course, everyone thought I was too young, too naive, too everything. But I didn't care. I read the contracts, memorized the organizational charts, and paid attention to every meeting I could sit in. I took notes, asked questions, and yes, sometimes I corrected mistakes that adults made. Over the years, I became indispensable. I wasn't just learning, I was contributing. I saved deals, improved operations, and even suggested strategies that increased profits. I was there from the late nights to the emergency calls, the holidays spent in offices instead of family gatherings. And I thought that loyalty, that hard work, would earn me a place at the table. But the day of the board meeting changed everything. I woke up to my usual morning routine, coffee in hand, mentally preparing for the discussions ahead. I checked my emails, expecting the calendar invite. Nothing. Not even a hint that I should attend. I called my assistant, a loyal woman who had been with our company longer than I'd been alive. Did I miss the board meeting invite? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She hesitated, then said quietly, "No, they didn't include you this time." I laughed nervously. "They forgot, right?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "They didn't forget." It was like someone had slammed a door in my face. My chest tightened, and a strange mix of disbelief and anger surged inside me. How could they do this? I had dedicated my life to this company. I had sacrificed more than anyone, and yet here I was erased, invisible, excluded from a meeting that would determine the company's future. I spent the rest of the morning replaying conversations in my head. Every subtle dismissal, every whispered remark, every slight that I had brushed off as trivial, suddenly, it all made sense. They didn't want me there. They thought I didn't belong. At that moment, I realized something crucial. This wasn't just about one meeting. It was about control, power, and my family. They thought I was too naive, too young, too family to notice. But I did notice, and I wasn't going to stay invisible. Not anymore. At first, I wanted to believe it was an accident. Maybe they genuinely forgot to include me. Maybe the email system glitched, or someone had made a simple mistake. I tried to hold on to that hope, because the alternative, the truth, was too bitter to swallow. But the signs were everywhere. Subtle at first, but impossible to ignore once I started paying attention. Conversations that once included me went silent the moment I entered the room. My opinions, which had once been valued or at least tolerated, were suddenly dismissed without explanation. Projects I had poured months of effort into were reassigned, with no acknowledgement, as if I had never touched them. And then it hit me. They didn't just overlook me. They had deliberately excluded me. At first, disbelief clouded my mind. My heart raced, my stomach churned. I couldn't fathom that my own family, people I had trusted, people I had sacrificed for, could do this. Could erase me so casually from something so critical, something I had helped build. I thought about all the small moments I had brushed off over the years. The way my older brother always seemed to have the final word, even on decisions I had researched extensively. The way my cousin would subtly redirect praise away from me in front of our parents. The way my father, who had once encouraged me endlessly, had started to rely on me less, relying on others for decisions I knew I was more capable of handling. It was a pattern, not a mistake. And the realization stung like 1,000 tiny cuts. I felt anger. Raw, burning anger. The kind that rises in your chest and makes your hands shake. But it was mixed with something else. Something sharper. A sense of injustice, so profound that I knew I couldn't ignore it. I sat alone in my office, staring at the empty calendar where my board invite should have been. My mind raced. How could I respond without making a scene? How could I assert myself without jeopardizing everything I had worked for? Then, a thought crystallized. Revenge isn't about reacting in anger. It's about strategy, patience, precision. I began to plan not with emotion, but with calculation. I would observe. I would learn. And when the time came, I would make sure they couldn't ignore me, couldn't dismiss me, couldn't erase me ever again. Because here's the thing. Betrayal hurts the most when you love the people who hurt you. But it also gives you an advantage. You see the cracks in their armor. You notice their weaknesses. And I intended to use that knowledge to my advantage. In the days that followed, I became hyper-aware. Every meeting I wasn't invited to, every conversation I was excluded from, became an opportunity to observe. I watched my family, my so-called allies, and the board members with the scrutiny of someone who had been underestimated for far too long. I noticed patterns, small habits, and hidden tensions. My brother, for example, who always acted confident, had moments of hesitation when discussing certain contracts that, coincidentally, I had worked on months ago. My cousin, who prided himself on his connections with investors, often over-explained points that I already knew were inaccurate. Every one of them thought they were untouchable, but there was one thing they hadn't accounted for. I had been quietly learning everything about the company structure, legal framework, and ownership for years. And now I began digging deeper, meticulously, deliberately. Late nights were spent poring over shareholder agreements, old meeting minutes, and contracts stored in dusty filing cabinets. I contacted a few trusted insiders, long-time employees who had been loyal to the company, not just the family name. I didn't tell them what I planned. I only asked for factual clarifications, documentation, anything that could verify my contributions and my standing. The more I dug, the more I realized just how much control I actually had, hidden in plain sight. My name appeared in legal documents I had never fully noticed before. My father, years ago, had quietly ensured that I had significant ownership rights that no one else remembered. Rights that my family assumed were insignificant. Suddenly, the board meeting that excluded me didn't feel like a threat. It felt like an opportunity. I also began noting alliances, or the lack thereof, within the board. Some members were ambitious, but easily swayed. Others were loyal to appearances, not principles. And there were a few who, if convinced, could become silent allies. Every relationship, every personality, every small weakness was a piece of the puzzle I was starting to assemble. I knew that confrontation without preparation would be disastrous. I needed evidence. I needed leverage. I needed timing. And so, while my family smugly assumed I was licking my wounds in silence, I was quietly planning a move that none of them would see coming, because in business and in family perception is everything. And they perceived me as powerless. I intended to make sure they would never underestimate me again. I knew that the moment I acted recklessly, I would lose everything. So I spent hours, days, and nights strategizing. Every move had to be precise, calculated, and invisible until the perfect moment. This wasn't about anger, it was about reclaiming what was mine, proving my worth, and exposing the arrogance of those who had thought they could erase me. Step 1. Solidify my legal position. I worked with a trusted lawyer to confirm my ownership rights, to understand every clause in the shareholder agreements, every loophole that could be leveraged, every document, every signature, every obscure bylaw became ammunition. I wasn't going to fight blindly, I was going to fight with facts, with undeniable authority. Step 2. Build quiet allies. I reached out to employees who had long supported me, those who remembered my contributions when no one else did. I didn't ask for loyalty in the emotional sense. I asked for truth, for verification, for witness to my role. I gathered records, emails, even photographs of projects I had spearheaded. These people didn't owe me anything, but they respected competence, and that competence was mine. Step 3. Observe my family's weaknesses. They thought they were untouchable. My brother's arrogance, my cousin's obsession with appearances, even my father's pride, they all had vulnerabilities. I documented them mentally, like a chess player noting the weaknesses in an opponent's formation. Timing would be everything. Step 4. Prepare for the reveal. I imagined the boardroom, the faces, the shock. I didn't want a fight. I wanted clarity. The goal wasn't to humiliate, though shock would naturally follow, it was to establish undeniable control. I would present the facts calmly, strategically, and professionally. When the truth landed, there would be no argument. And so, while my family went about their daily routines, smug and oblivious, I was quietly assembling my arsenal. Contracts, agreements, emails, personal contributions, even hidden clauses in the company bylaws, all of it. Every piece was a stepping stone toward one inevitable moment. The day they would realize that I was not only indispensable, but in control. It was a delicate balance. If I moved too soon, they would resist, or worse, counterattack. If I waited too long, they might uncover my intentions. Patience was key. Precision was essential. And confidence? Confidence was my weapon. I wasn't just planning revenge. I was planning justice. And in the end, justice, I realized, would taste far sweeter than anger ever could. After weeks of careful preparation, the first moves of my plan began to take shape. I wasn't making grand gestures, nothing obvious, but every subtle action added to the momentum that would soon become unstoppable. I started by reinforcing my presence quietly within the company. I sent precise, professional emails highlighting past contributions I had made to critical projects, emails that were factual and emotional, impossible to dispute. I made small suggestions in meetings I was allowed to attend, ideas that improved efficiency and profits. Slowly, I reminded people, without saying a word directly, that I had been integral to the company's success. Meanwhile, I checked on my legal position again and again. Every shareholder agreement, every clause, every meeting minute, anything that could strengthen my position was cross-referenced and confirmed. Knowledge was power, and I was gathering it like a shield. I also began gauging my family's reactions. They were confident, as always, convinced they had everything under control. My brother strutted around, smug, speaking with authority he assumed was unchallenged. My cousin flaunted connections and flattery, assuming that charm could cover any cracks in their knowledge. And my father, he was quiet, but I knew his pride blinded him to my quiet strategy. Then came the small victories, almost imperceptible to anyone but me. A board member acknowledged my previous contributions in a side conversation. An investor who had been skeptical of my competence asked for clarification on a project I had led. I documented these moments carefully. Each one was a thread in the net I was weaving. The tension was delicious. I wasn't acting yet, but every subtle ripple I caused increased my leverage. My family had underestimated me, as they always did. And underestimation is the most dangerous weapon you can wield. One evening, as I sat in my office reviewing the documents once again, my lawyer called with confirmation. I had the legal authority to call an emergency board meeting if necessary. The thought of that power made my pulse quicken. I wasn't acting out of malice. I wasn't seeking petty revenge. I was asserting reality, the undeniable truth of my role, my contributions, and my ownership. I smiled quietly. They believed the game was theirs to control. But soon, they would learn that I had been controlling it from the shadows all along. And when that day came, the boardroom would be the stage, and the truth would be the show they could never forget. I thought I had everything planned. Every detail accounted for, every ally identified, every document in order. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. Just when you think the board is your chessboard. It happened while I was reviewing financial reports late one night. Something caught my eye, a discrepancy that didn't make sense. At first, I thought it was a clerical error, the kind that happens in any large company. But as I dug deeper, the pattern became unmistakable. My older brother, he had been siphoning funds, quietly, methodically. Years of money disappearing, disguised as legitimate expenses. My heart raced, not with fear, but with disbelief and anger. The betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't just about excluding me from a board meeting, it was about hiding critical truths, undermining the company we all had built together. Suddenly, my plan had another layer. This wasn't just about proving my worth. It was about protecting the company, exposing corruption, and ensuring that those who had tried to manipulate and deceive couldn't continue. I stayed up that night, reviewing every transaction, every account, every contract that had passed under my brother's control. The deeper I dug, the more shocking the evidence became. And yet, I remained calm. Because unlike them, I wasn't blinded by arrogance or entitlement. I didn't need to attack with emotion. I only needed the truth. The next morning, I called my lawyer and shared the findings. We discussed how to incorporate this revelation into the larger strategy. I would wait for the board meeting, the perfect stage, but when I revealed my evidence, it would hit harder than anything they had imagined. I realized then that the story wasn't just about me being underestimated. It was about accountability, about justice, and about reclaiming the company from the very people who had pretended to care most about it. And in that moment, a cold, sharp clarity settled over me. The stakes were higher. The plan was more powerful. And the family who had tried to erase me would soon learn that I was not just present, but untouchable. The day finally arrived. The boardroom was buzzing with the usual pretense smug faces, confident smiles, and a sense of control that my family thought was untouchable. My older brother leaned back in his chair, speaking with authority, clearly proud of his exclusion of me. My cousin nodded at everything he said, as if blind loyalty could cover up the cracks I had discovered. I walked in, calm and composed, holding the folder that contained everything: contracts, shareholder agreements, emails, financial evidence, and the records of my brother's covert siphoning. The room went quiet as eyes turned toward me, some in surprise, some in barely concealed irritation. I let them wait. Silence has a power all its own. And then I spoke. "Before we begin," I said, my voice steady, measured, and commanding, "I'd like to remind everyone who actually holds the majority ownership of this company." A flicker of disbelief crossed my father's face. My brother's smug confidence wavered for a fraction of a second. My cousin's jaw tightened. But I didn't rush. I didn't shout. I let the weight of my words hang in the air. I opened the folder and began presenting the evidence, systematically and calmly. Every document verified my ownership stake. Every contract, every signed agreement, every project I had led was clearly outlined. Then I moved to the final piece: the financial discrepancies my brother had tried so desperately to hide. Every transaction was documented, every hidden expense traced, every lie exposed. The room shifted. The atmosphere changed. Shock replaced arrogance. Confusion replaced confidence. And in that silence, I could see the realization dawn on their faces. The game they thought they controlled was never theirs to play. My brother tried to speak, to justify, to deflect, but I stopped him with a single glance. Calm, collected, authoritative. I didn't need to argue. The facts spoke for themselves. By the end of the meeting, it was undeniable. I wasn't just present. I wasn't just competent. I was in control. The family that had tried to erase me, to dismiss me, to underestimate me, had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. I had won not through anger, not through manipulation, but through strategy, patience, and undeniable truth. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: respect. Not just from them, but from myself, because they had thought they could erase me. They had thought they could keep me out. But I hadn't just reclaimed my seat at the table, I had rewritten the rules entirely. The days after the boardroom showdown was surreal. My family was quiet, subdued, no longer carrying the confidence they once flaunted so easily. There were no dramatic confrontations, no shouting matches. The truth had done all the work for me. I took control of my role with calm authority. Decisions were no longer made behind closed doors without my knowledge. Projects were redirected, finances were scrutinized more carefully, and accountability became the standard. The employees who had long respected me now treated me with the recognition I had earned, but never demanded years ago. And my family, they had to adjust to the reality they had ignored for too long. My brother's arrogance faded into cautious humility. My cousin learned that charm and connections couldn't replace competence. And my father, he said little, but the pride in his eyes was unmistakable, tinged with regret that he hadn't seen it sooner. I didn't humiliate anyone unnecessarily. That wasn't the point. True power isn't about revenge, it's about proving your worth, asserting your authority, and doing so with grace. I had done that. And in the process, I realized that the most important victory wasn't control of the company, it was self-respect, confidence, and the knowledge that I would never again be underestimated. For the first time in years, I felt free. free from the silent judgments, free from the assumptions of incompetence, free from the invisible cage of family expectations. I had taken what was rightfully mine, not out of anger, but out of necessity, and in that calm, steady moment of victory, I understood something essential. The most satisfying power isn't in humiliating others. It's in quietly, decisively, and irrevocably showing that you were never the underdog you were assumed to be. Sitting alone in my office that evening, looking out over the city lights, I realized how much this journey had taught me. Betrayal is a powerful teacher, even when it comes from the people you trust most. It taught me patience, because rushing in without preparation would have ruined everything. It taught me observation, because noticing the smallest patterns and weaknesses can make the difference between failure and success. And most importantly, it taught me strategy, because true power comes not from anger or aggression, but from knowledge and precision. I also understood something that I hadn't truly appreciated before. Underestimation can be a gift. My family assumed I was weak, inexperienced, or naive. They assumed I wouldn't notice, wouldn't fight back, wouldn't take the time to plan. Their underestimation became my advantage. It allowed me to move unseen, gather evidence, and prepare a strategy that would leave no room for doubt. Revenge, I learned, isn't about retaliation. It isn't about making people pay for their mistakes. True revenge is about proving, quietly and decisively, that their assumptions were wrong. It's about reclaiming your dignity, asserting your worth, and ensuring that no one can underestimate you ever again. And so, I emerged not just victorious in business, but victorious in life. I had proven to myself that I could navigate betrayal, challenge assumptions, and rise above the obstacles that others placed in my path. I had transformed my anger into action, my hurt into strategy, and my exclusion into empowerment. The truth is simple. Those who try to erase you will never succeed if you know your value. And when you embrace that value, when you act with clarity and precision, there's nothing anyone can do to stop you. So, here I am, looking back at everything that happened. The exclusion from the board meeting, the whispered doubts, the silent betrayals, it all feels like a distant memory now. What I learned through it all is far more valuable than anger or revenge. It's about resilience. It's about strategy. It's about recognizing your own worth. Even when the people closest to you failed to see it, they thought they could erase me. They thought I would sit quietly in the shadows, unnoticed and powerless. But I didn't just reclaim my place, I rewrote the rules entirely. And the satisfaction in that isn't in proving them wrong. It's in proving to myself that I am unstoppable, capable, and worthy. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to take away from my story, it's this: do not let anyone underestimate you. Observe, prepare, act with strategy and patience. And when the moment comes, don't just step forward, own it, because the people who doubt you, exclude you, or try to erase you, they don't define your value. You do, and that is the ultimate power. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, your strength isn't always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it's quiet, calculated, and undeniable. And when you wield it, the world has no choice but to see you for exactly who you are.